So my name is Ghazaleh Zogheib, or Zalia, which is much easier. I am a curator and a language teacher. I am originally from France, and my parents are Palestinian, Lebanese, and American, so I'm a bit of a mix. I work mostly on projects that revolve around the educational aspect of art and very much on linguistics. And I'm just muting everyone, sorry. Oh, what happened? Did that work? Yes, we're okay. But Gil, now you're muted, so I'm gonna unmute you. There you go. Is that working?
It's fine.
There you go. There you are. Now we can hear you. Okay, great. Yeah, so I work a lot I worked recently with a young artist called Ryan Al-Nayal. She is Sudanese British, and she creates these digital prints on the mix of culture. And I've also worked with a Belgian Moroccan artist called Zema1, who has also works on the mix of culture and mediums. And that's how I got to know Gil, actually, because I exhibited at P21 Gallery, and I got to know his work before I got to know him, actually, and it was very interesting. I discovered his online exhibition. He shared some of his works with me as well, and I decided that I wanted to write an article about his work, because we come from two very, I guess people could look at it as two opposites of a spectrum in a way, and somehow we're also very similar because we both, you know, interact in this mix of culture and you know, nations and lands. And our approach to art is, I think, in both cases very educational in some ways. Gil, do you want to maybe introduce yourself, or yeah, maybe just before we start with the questions?
Yeah, we are just a quick announcement. We are muting all of the videos and all of the videos and sound because it's confusing as it is doing this presentation, and there are going to be a lot of links and getting back and forth into the conversation from the website, etc. We will open the videos if you want to show yourself. If not, you can mute your own videos just before the last section of the conversation, where it's open to your questions. Please put your questions at the chat. It will be easier for us, but we can do it also the last minute. So,
and we do want to try and answer those questions as we go if they're relevant to what we're talking about. Otherwise, we'll answer at the end of the conversation. So please feel free to ask at any time.
Okay, thank you, Zalia. Yeah, I mean, most of the stuff about me is on the website, so I'll do it very, very quickly just to have the opportunity to have more time for the discussion. I was born in London, grew up in Israel, came back here.
No, muted.
I started doing art relatively late age, 30. It's come actually from activism. Long story, maybe touch it in one of the questions. So using art practices as part of activist work rather than as artist. And when I finished my PhD, which took a long, long time, actually dedicating since then all of my time as a practitioner art, as well as running a small art space that dedicates and promotes socially engaged art in Brighton. I'll leave the introduction, I think, here, and we dive into the questions.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, my first question was really kind of, when did you actually start work as an artist? I guess that's more like, when did you first consider yourself an artist? Because I guess that's also a process, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's in this term, it's quite a difficult question because there are a few points that I might say, this is where I start to become an artist. One of the points, or maybe start to do art, and art that was exhibited was, I was studying BA in History of Art, and I was also taking curatorial and cultural studies seminar headed by Ghazaleh Zogheib. And for that yearly seminar, I produced a film that related to a journalist campaign. I was working as full-time journalist at the time. A campaign against destroying remnants of a small Palestinian village that was in the north of Tel Aviv. So in a way, my first artwork, this kind of experimental film, was completely linked to journalistic or campaign work and linked to Palestinian issues. And this film and research and journalistic campaign actually led to a PhD in architecture, which in turn also brought me even closer into art practice. So this was one point. The other point was when I came to London, I lose my language. I couldn't write anymore in Hebrew. I was a campaigner journalist, but there was issues that really disturbed me in the managing of this city. And one of them was social cleansing from public spaces. At this point, I created a small group that called Transgressive Architecture, and we started doing intervention in public spaces with a project that called the Bed Sheets. I still saw myself as an activist at the time. The first time that I actually called myself an artist was when I went back for a few years to Israel and got a scholarship community artist or artist in the community, and I started working in Jaffa Democratic School. It's a Palestinian school in Jaffa, where I created a project for the whole year that talked about the Palestinian history of Jaffa through art practices, working with the children there on Islamic architecture, about the villages that used to be where Tel Aviv is now, about the history of Jaffa, doing intervention in public spaces, photography, etc. You can see some of it in the photos. And parallel to that, teaching in a School of Art and Architecture with mature students, the students work with the children in the school and produce an exhibition. It wasn't easy from various ways. I mean, the fact that I was teaching Palestinian history in Palestinian school was due to the fact that no other teacher in the school under the Israeli education system were daring to do that, and fear of losing their job. I could take the risk because I wasn't under this system. But it had, in the end, had some adverse effects. My contract in the art school, in the architectural and art school academy, was stopped after this project, partly because of the new rule in Israel, new law, which prohibit institutes that are supported by the government to to teach the Palestinian narrative, or basically the history of Palestine. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because you do work, I mean, that isn't only about Palestine. I think it's worth mentioning. I mean, the new Union Jack, for example, which is quite famous. But it feels like maybe your awakening to art maybe was kind of alongside this Palestinian cause in a way.
It, it's, it's the Palestinian cause, and it's a very big part of my PhD research. So the art was kind of a product of a research.
Yeah.
This is why it's concentrated on Palestinian issues, although it's continuing because it's close to my heart.
Of course. And so recently, it seems for those who kind of know your work and who've known it for a while, I mean, I certainly have noticed that your work has kind of shifted. Your pieces are becoming maybe more visual, less verbal. Can you tell us a bit about that? How do you explain that?
Yes, I mean, most of my art in the first few years when I started doing it was public intervention. So there was visual elements, but it was also very performative. I don't know, I don't think we have, we can see it here. But take, for example, the New Union Flag project is not to do with Palestinian issue, but it is to do with colonialism, of the colonial legacy of Great Britain. It started as a visual piece, but most of the project was actually taking it into public interaction, to rallies, demonstrations, and in a way then it started to be invited into galleries and museums. So when it was invited into the Eternal Contemporary, I needed to create a room installation so people actually accommodate the installation, sit there. You can see some of the photos here with agit props, art objects that are also used for agitation or for social and political reason. So it's always mixed. The exhibition in P21 maybe is the kind of the most visual in terms of what I've been doing, because it's a gallery. And I wanted to answer the, you know, the physicality of the space. But it's going back and forward. So even piece that created for the gallery enable certain playfulness or interaction with the audience in various ways. And we might touch it.
I mean, yeah, I mean, when you look at these images, you can see how, I mean, it's so poignant. Obviously, the piece in itself is powerful, but what makes it even more powerful is having all these people in the pictures, right? And kind of breaking that fourth wall, which is a theme that comes up quite a lot in your work. And that's because you've done a lot of performances in public spaces, but you've also, right now with this exhibition, you're taking this work that you've done on the street, interacting with people directly, and you're bringing it into the gallery space. And obviously, you've also now with confinement have been working a lot from your studio. So can you talk a bit about that, having like, how does that process, can you explain a bit about that process?
Yeah, it's not necessarily easy to interpret that stuff that was done in public space and getting into a gallery, and even not, you know, for the first stage of the exhibition should have started in April. So, but because of COVID-19 crisis, it was postponed. Most of the work were already created in my studio and been documented there, and then bringing them into, I didn't bring them into P21 because of the curfew. Bringing them into P21, which was took some time. Even some of the complete artwork where I felt that they needed to be changed. If you show the cry installation, which is the next link, or the artifacts, which you don't have the link on this question, but it's the one that going through the
right here I have the Emperor's New Clothes as the next link, but is that the one you want to show? Yeah.
You can show this one. And if you look later in question 7, there is the link to artifacts. It will be also of interest in this question, I think. So if you just click on the film here, so this is taken from the exhibition here. It started as a proposal for a window shop for a gallery, and then in Tel Aviv, it wasn't accepted for various reasons that you probably can guess. And it took me a year and a half to transform it from something that's supposed to be in a window shop, created specifically for that window shop in a street where we have a lot of clothing shop, into the street, into intervention in Tel Aviv and in London. In London, it was done during the 100 years for Balfour Declaration.
Yeah, on Trafalgar Square, right? Yeah.
Yeah, where the actor that was doing it while I'm filming it, saluting Nelson Column, and
sure
taking it
people
from
love that.
there. Yeah, it wasn't easy, but the police didn't. The police chased me when I was doing it in Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
And then taking that from this kind of action into a gallery space, and then you think, you know, what is the point of doing it in the gallery, in public spaces, much more effective, etc. But not necessarily the case, because when it's done in the public space, okay, people got shocked from this image, from the action, but they didn't have much time to engage with the textual part of this work, which started actually the visuals, and the textual part is something like 90 quotes comparing Israeli politicians, rabbis, quotes to Nazi propaganda or Ku Klux Klan propaganda. And when you compare these texts, you see that you can take the Jew, the Black, and the Arab out of that, and not showing who said what. You can hardly tell where the quote is. So when people now come into the gallery and they see it in this format, you have people here sitting for half an hour and more just reading the texts on the screen. There is the benefits, you know, the sensation, the shock, you know, is less important than actually engaging with the research, the textual research behind the work. But again, it's going back and forward.
We have a question in the chat, which I'm happy to bring up, which is because obviously the piece you just showed is indeed quite controversial. So Jane is asking, what inspired you to have this very different perspective to most Israelis on Palestine and colonization?
Well, I was very right-wing until the age of 16, extreme right, I would say. And then we had the Kahana party, which was completely racist. I mean, it's go beyond territory, national territory, etc. It was completely racist. And I kind of seen what, you know, where it's basically ending. I mean, if you're right wing in Israel, or if you don't think that everybody who live in Israel, Palestine, whatever you call it, in this territory, from the sea to the Jordan River, if you don't support complete equal rights, like in any normal country, any democratic country, it will end up by transfer or death. There is no other solution. So I think I did a jump from there to on the left, and then through my research and learning about what happened in the Nakba, etc. But in even broader sense, that took me even further left. So this is kind of on a conscious level, but I think the fact that my mom is a Holocaust survivor and my dad is survivor of the Farhud in Iraq, somehow contribute to the ability to be maybe more sensitive. I can't really tell. I mean, for me, the question is not why my perspective is different, is why the perspective of the majority is not as mine. I perceive what is happening in Israel as insanity. Yeah, I hope it answers the question.
Thank you. I'm gonna share the screen. Can you just very quickly check the chat? I believe maybe you've received this or not, just a little private message. In the meantime, I'm going to share the screen to the next piece, which is a series of photographies, No Man's Land. If I can figure out how to share the screen again. Yes, there we are. Getting confused. Yes, so this is actually a photography series. So this is a bit more, this relates a bit more to your work in the studio, I believe, and or at least maybe also it's more gallery work in a way. How does that kind of relate to, because you've gone from being very controversial, performative artivist, right? There's that word that comes up every time we talk about your work. This is very much more of a gallery kind of setting. How do you explain that?
Well, it's funny. It is for exhibition in a gallery, but these photos were made in the fields at 2:00 at night when it was slightly raining.
Right.
It was pretty much, and it was on fields of a kibbutz. And when the security guard saw us doing it, there was a jeep coming with a big light shining at us, and we just left. So it's always tricky talking about studio work. They were edited at the studio indeed. This particular work, and which is part of a much bigger project, which I don't think we have time to discuss. People can see some of it. It's called No Man's Land. Talk about men in limbo situations. And in this case, this project was done while I was doing artist residency in Al-Fahim Gallery. It's a Palestinian gallery in Israel. I met this guy who didn't want to show his face or named. Is a third generation of internal refugees, or how in Israel they are called by the state, present absentees, kind of Orwellian term.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's basically Palestinians that were living in what is now Israel, 1948 borders, and were absent for a few days after the war, the 1948 war, and the state basically said that they are absentees, so their property, their houses, their fields, everything confiscated by confiscated by the state. So this guy is basically going to where the village was and where his granddad used to have the house, which was destroyed. And we did these photos both in some of the remnants of the village and in the field. The other project that we can see now that called Present Absentees is with other either people who were born in that village, which is near Al-Fahim, it's called Al-Ajun. Most of them live in Al-Fahim, either born there or their families. I took photos of them at the gallery and also in Old People House, where they are holding signs, empty signs. The empty signs represent the colonial imagery that enforced on many many colonized as wilderness or nothingness or the abyss, blank spaces that are all set of words, terms, and imageries to describe it. While they're holding this, what's supposed to be empty, I projected images, archival images from the Al-Fahim Gallery archive of Al-Ajun village and its surrounding. So yeah, this is kind of more studio and gallery-based work, but I think is not less strong than work that considered to be maybe more in your face that I was doing in public spaces.
Yeah, I like the fact that you mentioned, sorry, I'm just checking the chat quickly in case we have any extra questions. Thank you for the comments.
Yeah, just maybe to answer Ronald about, yeah, I didn't.
Yeah, Roland, yeah.
Part of the lands of Al-Ajun are now in Megiddo kibbutz, and I didn't want to get into the kibbutz itself. I mean, it's not only me, it's the person who I photographed, and I don't think that we will be let into the kibbutz to do this project, although I might be mistaken, but I just didn't want to have this conflict in the space where I'm with somebody who I conceive as might be vulnerable emotionally when we were doing.
I'm not going to show because you mentioned you used the word Orwellian in your previous question. And so I'm just going to share the screen with a, wait, I need to do this in a specific order. I keep getting confused. Share screen here. Okay, so there's a new piece actually, which actually for those who have seen the exhibition, it's not present in the actual exhibition. It is only present online. And it's a piece called Resolution, which hopefully I should be able to find. Actually, I have a link. Let me just use the link. That'll be much easier. There we go. And it's a very interesting piece. So obviously it's going to be complicated for me to play the track right now, but when you play it, as you can see here, what you get is edited recording, right, Gil, of the UN General Assembly in 1947, adopting the plan as Resolution 181, so basically approving the creation of the State of Israel. And I thought this piece was very interesting because, sorry, just checking my notes quickly. But yeah, it kind of gives you the impression that we're stuck in a loop because you edited the recording, right?
Yeah, so basically it's it's the vote in the UN in 1948. So if you're not familiar with that or don't really listen very carefully, you just think that it's the vote. But what I've done is that all of the countries that already made peace or whatever you call it, with Israel, and few of them, Arab countries, did it recently, are actually voting yes. So it was kind of trying to imagine what have happened if they were doing it in 48. What is to go back to the future? This is done from quite a confusion. I just didn't. It was difficult for me to contemplate what is going on now with normalization when you have people still dying in the occupied territories.
Yeah.
I didn't really know how to respond, and this kind of almost a knee-jerk kind of reaction. I'll leave the interpretation to you. I don't have much to say about this piece. I think I've done it, and I will have to think about it even more, which is not typical to my artwork. My artwork usually, it's very, very thought and then doing, and this one was kind of, let's see what happened. Yeah, and around the whole politics is a long conversation about the normalization process, etc.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very current right now. It's
And very complex. There was just one thing: if this fascist football group, Betar Yerushalayim, which a lot of their fans chanting "Death to the Arabs" in games, will be bought by Arab nation and owned by an Arab nation, maybe the whole process was worthwhile.
yeah.
Just not to have this chanting there, but yeah, this is on a light note.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, I think what I like the most with this piece is I'm a big fan of dystopian fiction, which is really not fiction ultimately, which is what I like about dystopian work. But yeah, that one very much, I don't know, resonated with me. I wonder if it's not because also it comes a little in the aftermath of this exhibition, right? And this exhibition obviously made me think of, we had this conversation before, but it very much resonates with UNESCO's rhinoceros, and that kind of the cry, literal cry for help. They you know, is like, please help, my country is turning into a fascist dictatorship, my society is transforming into rhinoceroses, and what is happening. And so I just thought that piece was so interesting because it alludes to time and being stuck in this loop, and are things ever going to change? Do they ever change? Or are we just stuck in this, you know, repeating history kind of thing, which ultimately is all very dystopian because, you know, we look at dystopian work and we think, oh, you know, this isn't our world, and then you're like, oh wait, it is our world. What's happening here?
It's true. Is another attempt. I mean, I do engage with the archive. I do engage with a lot of personal stories, as you see in the exhibition. Some of them are through sound, some from film, some images, and I think the situation becomes so dire that you start to kind of escape into imagination. It could be dystopian, but I don't know what could be more dystopian what's happening now. But it does throw you to beyond the reality on the ground, reimagining the past and how, if the past was different, the future might have been different, going into the future and looking back in the past, which I've done in another work, Artifacts. It's not particularly visual. It's more the description of the description of the work itself that is alluded to this direction. So yeah, it's another kind of direction that's trying to maybe imagine things differently.
I mean, yeah, and I mean, everything you're saying kind of comes back to that idea that that you're also doing archival work right now. I mean, it's something I mentioned in the article I wrote about Cry the Beloved Country, but it's true that that seems to be something that's really coming out with this latest exhibition, and this is a big part of you, right? Because I mean, you've done extensive research, you have a PhD. So how does your research work kind of fit in with your creative work?
I mentioned before that the research project, it wasn't in art, it was actually in architecture, did inform much of my artwork and still informing it. So from doing intervention in public spaces on issues of stuff that relate to Palestine, but also issues that relate to more generally to the colonial project and colonial legacy of the UK, to issues of social cleansing of public spaces, and it's informed public intervention and inform studio work. So this is in terms of the practices that came out of it. Part of the research is dealing with socially engaged photography and developing more socially engaged methodologies of taking photographs that influence, for example, the present and absentees project. Big part of the PhD is research into the imagery of nothingness or abyss or dead zone. The research is called the dead zone in the architecture of transgression, and this is directly linked to how Zionist and before that also American, English, French explorer coming to Palestine, and most of them with religious tendencies, Christian tendencies, looking at the land and how they describe it, still influence a lot of the artwork. But its influence is also because I think some of this imagery is still entrenched in the global psychic, and with, you know, definitely with Zionism. So it's part of it. You're showing now part of Rosetta. It was a film commissioned by Zochrot. It's an Israeli organization that work on the remembrance of the Nakba and on the return, promoting the return of the refugees. They do also a lot of research and advocacy work. So this work, particularly related to a Palestinian village just outside Jaffa. So the PhD research was partly touching the Palestinian villages that used to be in where Tel Aviv is now, but it's always to do with also very personal stories. I mean, the Irshid was where it's on a beach where I used to go a lot, and I was witnessing the destruction of the last remnant of this village, which was hurtful just to see, you know, this erasure, just complete erasure of any signs of the Palestinian past, which it's a crime. The actress that was about 16 years old, I think, Maram, was my student from Jaffa School. Her grandmother was just next to this village in another Palestinian or mixed Palestinian Jewish village, Manshia, so it's just next to it. So she wanted to act in this film as a kind of memorial to her grandmother house. And my experience, or my first kind of interaction with remnants of Palestinian village, at least when I was adult, started basically was the starting of the PhD research, and it started just because I was visiting this remnants of Palestinian village in north of Tel Aviv, going clubbing, near it, rave bar. So, research and biography, it's really interlinked.
Absolutely. And I mean, another big aspect that we mentioned earlier was also, so beyond the research and the archiving and the history and all that, there's the next step is the interaction, right? Getting the visitor to interact with the work and ultimately break that fourth wall, allowing them to have a true discussion. And I think that's very visible in the piece Obscured, which I'll share with you shortly. But just to kind of like give an idea of what it is, because even if we do share the page, you can't really see what it is. Can you describe it a little bit so that people can kind of understand what it's about?
Yeah, I'm just conscious about the time.
Yeah.
I will I couldn't show it actually in the gallery because of COVID-19, because it's involved wearing headphones. But I considered it as one of the most important pieces I've done recently. It can be shown online because I'll describe it and then maybe it will be more clear. It's Obscured is filming just one take of 10 minutes of Tel Aviv beach opposite, not by accident, of a small park called London Park or London Garden. It was taken in the April election, 2019, where there was glorious day, weather. Election days where there is sabbatical, people don't have to go to work. So a lot of people went to the beach. So it's picture perfect of Tel Aviv. It's what the government will use as a promotion to attract tourists to Tel Aviv. So that's what you see when you enter the gallery on a huge screen. Now, from the ceiling, you'll have five headphones dangling, and you put them, and each headphone has a recording. And the recordings are of hate crimes, or racial motivated attacks against Palestinians that happened in Tel Aviv beaches or other beaches in Israel. Now, when you go and put the headphone and listen to the testimonies by the people who were beaten up, some of them really severely, your body is obscuring the screen, so your shadow is covering the picture perfect of Tel Aviv beach. Now, I had to adapt this, so I did want to include at least one work, one testimony from that, and is the testimony that wasn't collected from media sources, but I actually recorded, and it's not to do with beating, but to do with the prevention of Palestinian accessing the beaches in Israel, accessing the sea. And the recording is of two Palestinian women from, you see the artwork here, the modified artwork. And you hear this testimony that at the age of 30 or something like that, they went the first time to the beach. They were smuggled by a woman that she's part of an organization called Disobedient Women, or Lo Metzaitot in Hebrew, and they smuggled families and women for a day at the beach in Jaffa. I can talk more about the adaptation and why it took this, but basically the sellotape, the duct tape is covering the horizon. You can hear the testimony online, so this piece work, also is for online viewing.
Yeah. So I can share the piece, but again, here's the link. I think yes, here it is. And everyone can go and listen to the recording. So yeah, that's very much a piece that evolved. So I'm just going to kind of speed through, and maybe we should talk a little bit about the Palestinian embroidery patterns that have been kind of invading your work lately. So I'm going to share the screen with examples of this work, but we see it in like stencils, we see it in form of stamps, and in actually way more versions. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, although it sounds, what is Palestinian embroidery to do with me? In a way, this work also starts from a biographical point. My mom is from Bulgaria. I grew up with Bulgarian embroidery on napkins, on tablecloth, etc. And I was very surprised when I first encountered Palestinian embroidery, how similar it is. I have tried to look into Bulgarian embroidery and see what are the symbols, but until now I couldn't find. But with Palestinian embroidery is much more research, and at least in English language. And so there was from the start something familiar, at least from the look of it. Now, to work with Palestinian, if I want to talk about Palestinian issues, I wanted to use some symbols, something from Palestinian culture to identify this is Palestinian, because some of the works in the exhibition in this project are not immediately recognized something which is maybe to do with Palestinian at all, if you don't read the text. So Palestinian embroidery was something that was both kind of close to me visually. Now, although my dad is from Iraq, I never studied Arabic. And it's difficult for me to study languages anyhow because I'm dyslexic. So the Arabic languages, though I love Arabic music, is kind of, I don't read or understand it. To use the Palestinian flag, I think it's a bit limiting in terms of the use that I can do it in artwork. So the embroidery was the immediate thing that I wanted to engage with. And also because it has meanings, the various embroideries has particular meanings. So some is particular plants, some are more describing people or places or objects, etc. So it's almost kind of a language, but not with text. It's visual language. It's kind of hieroglyphs, which it's more visual, related to visual culture. And what I've done, the embroidery it's not embroidery. It's a stencil or it's a stamp. It's a design. The particular design here has particular meaning. So the middle is representing a spring, water spring. What look like E and the opposite E represent houses, and the outer rim of this design represent olive trees. So putting it together, which again, it's a kind of cut and paste, not dissimilar to what embroiderers do when they are doing a map, tablecloth, or something to wear, kind of representing a village or a settlement. So it's kind of the basic unit for Palestinian existence. And the original work was actually meant to be a big stamp or a stencil to mark Palestinian property from 1948. So houses that remained and then confiscated by the state and sold to Jewish hands, etc., to be marked by me or other activists in Israel, but also to do with what's happening now in the occupied territories, a lot of it in East Jerusalem, where Palestinians are being chucked out from their houses by settlers, with the backing of the very democratic so-called high court in Israel, and just families are chucked out. And the idea was to mark this Palestinian property with this stencil graffiti. In the gallery, because the action, which is important for me in this artwork, disappeared, there's no point to mark, thing in London. I did want to inject another possibility, so I transferred or transformed the embroidery into a barcode, and the various barcodes in the gallery, be it on a poster on the wall or part of a jewelry that people can wear, or part of a carpet. The barcode includes—
Just to be precise, it's actually a QR code which people can scan with their phone.
Yeah, if you have a QR code scanner on your phone, you can do it actually now. It should work. It depends on the size of the screen.
Let me quickly share the link so people can try that.
If you show the artifact work, which is in question 7, people can see how it works. Either artifact or—
Artifact, yeah, give me one. I'll get that down. Just to answer our latest question from Inbar, asking if there's a Turkish connection. I'm assuming with the embroideries. I mean, I'm assuming there might be. I mean, there's always a bit of a connection, isn't there?
There was Balkan influence through the Turkish Ottoman occupation of Palestine. So there are links. I mean, Palestinians were exposed to imports from the Ottoman Empire and from the Balkans. So yeah, there are links. But I don't know if there is the particular meaning. The Palestinian embroidery also is much more complex. It's not one meaning to a particular embroidery. It depends on which part of Palestine the embroidery came from, etc. But there is a beautiful exhibition and a book by the curator Rachel Dadman. It was exhibited in the Palestinian Museum in Ramallah and then in Beirut, which talk about that, and some other books that came in the past few years. So this work that was made particularly for the space of the gallery ends up in these jewelries, these pendants, and these pendants, when you scan the barcode, take you to reports of the Israeli or the international community against house demolition, to their reports about house demolition in the past year. So this is kind of use of activism. Doesn't have to be just going marching and demonstrations, etc. Sometimes it be more kind of you wear something and that can be scanned, take you to an information. You maybe want to show the agitprop. It's the other artifact, which take it to a kind of more commercial, I doubt it will be commercial, but to more kind of agitprop project where you do have objects which are not, one-off. Anybody can buy them, and they give information. If it's on the same shop, if you go down, thank you, Roland, for the info. Um, yes.
I'm gonna stop screen sharing and just share that link on the chat quickly.
If you scan, here you can scan, for example, the pillow or the bag. If you, the pillow will be, I think, the easiest. The cushion, so you can scan that. So, for example, this I imagine people having in their living room, but the embroidery, what look like embroidery there, it's a barcode, and you scan it. It takes you one side of the cushion will take you to Google Map where it's a Palestine, but it's saying only in text. It's not showing on the map. And on the other side, it takes you to now quite well-known petition that you can still sign on, where people petition Google to actually include Palestine in the Google map. So,
Yeah.
you know, something that middle-class people, how you call it, champagne socialites, in their living room and, you know, see the cushion and can just link into a petition and sign it. So
Definitely.
it's a joke, but, you know, it is.
We have a very nice question from Pam, who loves your work, says it's amazing and it deserves to be widely shown. So she's asking, what is next?
Well, this project, I mean, there are some work which are, you know, back to 2013. A lot of it was done in the past 2 years. It's a very big project. Only part of it is exhibited now in P21. And the idea is actually to try to find places to export it. So a tour of this exhibition, both in other places in the UK and internationally. How you do it, it's a good question. It's not easy, I think, to show this type of work. I mean, I produce a lot of other work which was much easier to find spaces to exhibit. The fact that it is in P21, which I love the space and I love the management here. They really help in putting it on. But it's an institution which I think a lot of people will agree with the content. And as I done with the New Union Flag project, which I took to places which were more risky, but also in a way beneficial, because you introduce knowledge and emotions and opinions that are might be controversial, but to people that might, you know, not know it, or people who might agree in the end. So I would love to see this exhibition going to the States, to other places in Europe, in the Middle East, in Africa, anywhere that will accept.
Looks like we lost Gil.
Yeah, we did, didn't we? Okay. So I know that he was also, yeah, so he was saying that he's thinking of maybe going around doing some tours. And he's disappeared now. So it's just me. But in the meantime, until he reconnects with us, maybe not. Are there any last questions before we head out? Hopefully Gil will make it back. I also want to, so we have another question here. You mentioned earlier that in a gallery environment, there's more time for the visitor. Gil is now calling me. Okay, maybe we can get him to answer over the phone. Hi, Gil. No, you just disappeared. Worst. Okay. How about, you know what, since we only have a few minutes left, what if I put you on speaker and then okay. So I'll just put you on speaker. We have one last question. Maybe you can answer it via speaker, which is going to be a bit weird, but okay. So Gil is on speaker, everyone. Can you hear him? Gil, can you say hello?
I'm trying to reconnect, but it's look like we have problem with the internet, yeah.
Yeah. So in the meantime, someone has asked, so Polly asks that you mentioned earlier that in a gallery environment, there is more time for the visitor to become the researcher themselves and are able to read the context behind the works. But, sorry, I'm just going down. But other than having more time to engage with the art, do you find people interact with your work differently in a public or a social space compared to a gallery setting? And how do you think this impacts the overall experience of your practice?
It's a good question. There is different way of interaction when it's in the gallery and outside the gallery. But for a start, we need to think who is coming the gallery and where the gallery is located, etc. So definitely, when it's happening in public space, the background of people, it's much more diverse. They might won't know anything about the work and what behind it, etc. So in a way, sometimes the conversation in public spaces were kind of more challenging, but sometimes also more interesting. In the gallery, usually the people will, if it's not kind of a gallery that's in the main street and just people might drop in, probably people read a bit before, etc. They are prepared. There is no, there is advantages and disadvantages on both sides, in and out. So I hope to continue work in all locations.
Okay, thank you, Gil. I think we're good. I think we'll just end it here, given that the internet has gone as well on your side. I want to thank everyone so much for coming back this week. Again, we really apologize for last week. This whole situation with the COVID has forced us to adapt and sometimes be ill-equipped in these situations. So we're really happy we were able to do this finally. It was a lovely evening. Thank you so much for all being here. We will definitely be posting this recording on your website, Gil, yes?
Yeah, on website, and it should be links also from social media.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So everyone can, if you want to share it later on, feel free. I'm putting this out there without being sure that it will happen or not, but I think, Gil, you are looking into potentially maybe having more discussions with other people. So there might be more talks coming.
Other events, yeah, will be added to the website. Yes.
Yes. So keep your eyes out. More talks to come with other interesting people. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your messages and your questions. This has been really, really great. And yeah, is there somewhere where people can reach out to if they have any other questions, Gil?
Yeah, through the website, so they can contact me on email there, through the website and on social media, so Instagram, direct message, or Facebook. Probably the best is through the email on my website.
Great. So we've shared the link to the website. Let me see if I can share it again just before we go. And yeah, here it is. I will share the link to the website once more, and then everyone is welcome to just go back to their living rooms and their lives, and no commute, hopefully, for anyone. So that'll be great. Thank you so much, everyone. You have a lovely evening, and hopefully we'll see you soon.